Hey everybody, it's me. I just did a video for like 45 minutes and it did not record. Oh my gosh, I don't even know if I can do this again, but I'm going to try. So anyway, hey everybody, I hope everyone's doing well. It's me. I'm going to try to get back into this again real quick. I don't even have that much time now. I just wanted to talk quickly about obviously all this new information and text messages have come out about the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni case. I have a lot of thoughts on them. Yesterday, I was going to make a video yesterday. I couldn't even do it because I was so, I had a very visceral reaction to all of it. And I was like, and I guess I didn't really realize that it was going to be Blake's evidence. Well, we didn't know whose evidence was going to come out first, but I didn't think oh, we're only going to see one person's evidence and then another's, and so it's going to still be heavily redacted. So when I started seeing all the redactions initially, everything was still somewhat benefiting Blake, it just made me mad. But now Justin's stuff is starting to come out, and we're starting to see even the stuff that Blake claims benefits her. It really doesn't seem like it totally does. So, but the big thing I really want to talk about is the Taylor Swift of it all. And not because she's like the biggest name in all of this, but because of all the stuff that came out that I saw yesterday, I'm most shocked about her. And how I didn't think it was as bad as it was. And then to find out how much she's involved in Van Zandt is it's just crazy to me. I just did not expect that. So we're going to get into all of that. That's kind of what I want to focus on. So as all of this is coming out and you start to see how that Taylor Swift of all people seems to have this really unwarranted hatred towards Justin Baldoni. And I understand Blake was in her ear telling her all this crap, but it just still seemed like the level of hatred she had towards him was not... It was more than just having a friend who worked with him and didn't like him. It seemed like Taylor had her own disdain for him, and I couldn't quite understand why. And I think that it became very clear after I saw some of the later text messages, later meaning in the time frame of everything that happened, and there's this connection to somebody that Taylor happens to hate. And then you start to realize how this all got as bad as it did. And unfortunately for Justin, none of this really was his fault at all. But so that's what the main thing I want to talk about. So Taylor Swift, at the end of all of this, when the New York Times article was about to come out, let me back up a little bit. So Taylor Swift had gotten a message from a woman named Ashley. I don't know her last name. And it was a friend of hers. And this Ashley person happens to work in PR. Well, Ashley somehow was privy to Jennifer Abel's text messages that she exchanged with Melissa Nathan, who was the crisis PR for Wayfarer, and saw that the two of them were had that conversation about Blake Lively, and most of it was really sarcastic. But of course, if you take some text messages out and you take out the emojis and you take out the sarcasm, it's pretty easy to make those messages look worse than they are. So she sees these messages and she contacts Taylor, who she knows is really good friends with Blake, and she's like, hey, I saw these messages. She's like, I really think Blake has a right to see these messages, and I want we need to figure out a way to get these to Blake. So somehow Stephanie Jones gets wind of it. Stephanie Jones only cares about Stephanie Jones, I think. And so she, for whatever reason, decided, I think she was mad at Jen Abel for leaving the company, and so she decides that she is going to find a way to get those to Blake. So Blake gets those early on, without any legal channels being very improperly, right? These are stolen messages. Blake even admits that she saw thousands of messages that were not meant for her to see, which leads me to believe that Blake Lively probably saw Jennifer Abel's, like, her whole phone and all of its contents, and like way more messages than just the ones between the publicists. Well, the connection and it's not just me who's made this connection, but it really stands out, and the mainstream media is not going to cover this. I guarantee you. If they do, I will take my words back, but I really don't think they're going to cover this angle. And the angle I'm talking about is, so Melissa Nathan, again, remember, she's the crisis PR for Wayfarer. Jamie Heath was, and Justin Baldoni, but mainly Jamie Heath, hired her to help them navigate the whole situation with Blake and her unfollowing, or the cast all unfollowing Justin. And mainly their strategy was they just wanted positive stories to be put in the press about Baldoni. They never said they wanted Blake to be smeared, ever. So Melissa Nathan, the crisis PR, and Jennifer Abel, who is Baldoni's regular publicist that works for Stephanie Jones at the time, they're having this conversation about basically where they're being like silly, and they're being kind of sarcastic, and they're basically like, well, we didn't have to do anything because she basically did this to herself, like, because all this stuff started coming out. And the term I hear used a lot in this case is organically, meaning, like, for example, if you guys are familiar with Kirsty Flaw, she has this really nice channel called Flawsome Talk that I like. She focuses a lot on the Blake case, but she does talk about other things too. But she is a Norwegian journalist, and she's the one that interviewed Blake when she was heavily pregnant. And she said, congrats on your little bump to Blake. And then Blake very snottily back at her said, well, congrats on your little bump. And of course, Kirsty was not pregnant. And come to find out, Kirsty Flaw actually had fertility problems. And then on top of that, after that comment, Kirsty was trying to kind of blow it off, and she started asking them about the character's wardrobe. And Blake's first comment on that is, well, would you ask the men about the wardrobe? And Kirsty's kind of like, well, yeah, I think I would, because it's a period piece. And so she just was nasty to her, essentially. So Kirsty said she remembered hearing that there were reports like that Blake was hard to work with. She had already known that from other sources, from her own experience. And that prompted her to put that interview out on YouTube. She had never spoken to the Wayfarer party. She had never spoken to Justin. So this stuff is coming out on its own, right? And Blake is blaming all of this on the crisis PR person, saying that, well, they're orchestrating all of this. And they weren't, okay? There's no proof that they were doing anything like that. And then, of course, Blake claims it's untraceable, which is just laughable, because nothing is truly untraceable. Well, so when she stumbles across these messages when this Ashley person tells Taylor about these messages, and they end up getting to Blake, that's like pretty much Blake's whole case with the retaliation thing. Now, granted, it's a misrepresentation, and so she wants to run these text messages in the New York Times article, and she knows that she can't put those messages in, because New York Times is, as much as I don't think they have the best journalistic integrity, New York Times is going to at least ask for a subpoena for those messages, because they don't want to put stolen data in their article, right? They don't want the liability for that. And so they're like, well, we have to figure out a way to get a subpoena for this. And they likely could have gotten a subpoena, no problem, but it would have taken extra time, because Jennifer Abel, whose data it was, would have had the right to hire an attorney and try to get the subpoena quashed. And it probably would have been granted, but it could have taken a lot of time. They wouldn't have been able to use the messages in the New York Times article. And there's a chance that the judge could have decided in Jen Abel's favor and said, well, no, you guys can't see these messages. And then what would they have done from there, right? So somebody, and it seems like Taylor was heavily involved, comes up with this idea about getting a subpoena through using this shell company called Zandt that Blake owns. Now, this company has never been, apparently Blake, in the documents, it's described as a company she uses for her personal expenses. But if you look at the history of the company, it's only ever been used once to deliver some kind of furniture. Now, one thing I did hear that I'm not 100%, like I don't have 100% verification on, but it seems plausible to me, is that the time that it was used to move furniture, it was actually for a video set of Taylor Swift. The furniture was being delivered to that set. I believe it was somewhere like in Europe. Now, this would make sense because that would explain why Taylor has familiarity with Zandt. Because why else would she know they have this crazy shell company that they don't even use? Now, the reason they used Zandt is because court records are public. They didn't want the record of this fake lawsuit that they were going to file to show up on the docket and be associated with Blake and Ryan. They did not think that anyone in the public would associate Zandt or know that that was connected to Blake and Ryan. Now, I believe it was Without a Crystal Ball that broke that story. You know, kudos to her. But had it not been for that, I don't know that would have come out. I don't know what they would have done about producing a subpoena. You know, I think it would have, I don't know, it probably would have had to have come out, but I guess I'm just not sure. But, so basically what this is they're laundering stolen data. This is very much stolen evidence. My hope is that the evidence gets thrown out based on the way it was obtained and based on the way that it was, the court system was, it's an abusive process. It's a misuse of the court system. The attorneys involved in that ought to be ashamed of themselves. Now, I did a whole video on Zandt where I talked about why, what they did and what's so improper about it, and I get into the whole thing. I know I did the video on Easter of last year, so if you want to look for it, I don't have that many videos out, so you could probably find it pretty easily. I'm a newer YouTuber, so like linking things out in the description and all that, I'll try, but if you want to watch the video about Zandt, I would highly recommend it, just because it can be a little, unless you totally understand the whole thing, and I'm sure most of you do. I don't want to come across like condescending or anything like that. But really quick, I do want to explain it for anybody that might not understand what they did. So they filed this lawsuit where they sued Doe defendants. Okay, it was like Doe defendants 1 through 10. Doe meaning like John Doe, Jane Doe. Now, lawsuits with Doe defendants are appropriate in some situations where you don't necessarily have all of the defendants. Might not be known to you yet. So an example that I think is really easy to understand is, let's say you have a client, you're an attorney, and a client comes up to you and says, hey, I got really severely burned after drinking coffee from McDonald's. I suspect that they're not serving their coffee at the temperature that they are legally allowed to. So you go to McDonald's, you buy coffee, you test the temperature, and the coffee is, it's supposed to be no higher than 300 degrees, and let's say it's 350. So you said, yes, I'm going to take on your case, and put you, we're going to sue McDonald's. Now, you tell the customer or the client, I also suspect there are other fast food restaurants that are doing this, and I'm going to have to further investigate and see if anyone comes forward. But until I figure out who those restaurants are, I'm going to just add, so it's going to be McDonald's and then Doe defendants 1 through 10. And the reason you do the Doe defendants is because, let's say someone then comes forward, you put the word out, you're looking for coffee burn victims from fast food restaurants. Then somebody calls you and they're like, yep, I got burned from Burger King's coffee. You go to Burger King, you test it, their coffee's 360 degrees. And at that point, you amend the lawsuit and you add Burger King as your Doe defendant number 1. So then at that point, it's McDonald's and Burger King, and then you have room for, 8 or 9 more defendants. And what that does is it allows you to start the legal process in your case for the McDonald's case while you're still doing an investigation. And it speeds up the legal process a little bit, which the legal process is such a slow process that, of course, anything you can do to not make it so slow, you're going to do. Well, in the Van Zandt lawsuit, it's not like they sued Jen Abel and then Doe defendants 1 through 10. They sued all Doe defendants. And that doesn't make sense because they knew that they wanted the subpoena for Jen Abel's phone. They knew who and what they were after. So why would you not put Jennifer Abel as the subject of the subpoena? Well, it's because they did not want Wayfarer to find out about this incoming article. And they did not want them to find out about the stolen messages. And so here's the thing. In New York, a judge does not have to sign off on a subpoena. Okay, other states, like I know Florida, for example, it requires a judge to sign off on a subpoena. So this could not have happened in Florida, for example. Because what they did is they generated the subpoena off of this lawsuit that meant nothing. Like, they used very boilerplate jargon, just saying like they had employees who committed misconduct. They didn't say anything specific. And as soon as they got their subpoena, they withdrew the lawsuit before it ever was assigned to a judge. So they basically, they abuse their power, they abuse the process. And if Taylor Swift is the one who really did use that company in order to import furniture onto a music video set, it leads me to believe, like, okay, how much of this came from her thinking and trying to figure something out? These attorneys are willing to do whatever for these celebrities. Like, they don't care if it's unethical, if it's illegal. Do I think Judge Lyman cares? I don't know. He hasn't done anything about it to this point. In reality, this evidence related to Van Zandt, these text messages that were used in the hit piece New York Times article, they should not be allowed in court. And that's my hope, is what the outcome is going to end up being with this evidence, is the judge is going to say, look, you guys abused the process. You didn't notify the parties. You withdrew it before it was assigned to a judge. It's very obvious what was going on, and therefore this is not evidence that you can present at trial. That's a very reasonable and normal response to something like this. It's pretty egregious, okay? Well, so after all of that happens, Taylor is well aware that this crisis PR person, Melissa Nathan, works for this company called TAG. TAG is I think they're a PR firm. I believe they specialize in crisis PR specifically. because most PR people are not crisis PR. Crisis PR is considered like a specialty. So Taylor Swift knows that Melissa Nathan works for Tag, and she also knows that Tag was bought and currently is owned by Scooter Braun. So Taylor, expresses that she's angry because she's perceiving this as like basically Scooter Braun's company is helping, Justin smear her best friend in the press. And, she's looking at it from this really incorrect lens, right? And I think her hatred towards Baldoni meaning Taylor Swift, her hatred towards Baldoni was emphasized and very much inflamed by the fact that she's like, well, I can't believe they're using Crisis PR owned by Scooter Braun. Now, what's interesting is I don't know that I think Justin knew that it was owned by Scooter Braun, that Tag was owned by him, because just the way he acted, I never suspected that. But, and it never came up like in text messages or anything, and I don't think Jamie Heath knew that either. I think it's one of those things, and I'm sorry, I might be repeating myself. I may have already said this. I'm sorry, this is the second video I recorded, so I could be walking in circles here, so I apologize if that's the case. So anyway, I think we have our answer as to why Taylor was so triggered, and it's the Scooter Braun connection. But, there's these messages right before the New York Times article came out where Blake and Taylor are just sitting there talking about how, like, basically she's telling Taylor, like, I couldn't have done this without you because those messages were, like, the heart of this whole thing. And, like, I'm so glad to call you my best friend, and this is, like, the best thing ever. And, Justin's just basically this big doofus who never thought we could coordinate something. And she called it a long game. Like, they had a whole strategic plan on how to get him in the end. And it's like, well, she wasn't allowed to take over the movie to the point where she got the rights to the sequel, or she didn't get absolutely everything she wanted. So I think in her mind, it's like, this is what she was deserving of it. And so the two of them really thought that they had really put together something real good with that New York Times article. I think when Justin started coming back with his evidence, and there's been, they're showing video footage that totally eviscerates Blake's claims. I mean, I can only imagine what Taylor was thinking at that point, but she certainly didn't want her record sales to be affected by it. So, if your very, very best friend in the whole wide world, I don't know. It's like, I think she just let her hatred towards Scooter Braun kind of cloud her judgment. So, but anyway, I'm very disappointed. It's not that I'm a huge Swiftie. I do have a 7-year-old daughter who really likes her, but you can't reconcile, like, her being this great, kind person and these text messages. The fact that she's so willing to just, like, dispose of a man's whole career and image, like, based on what? Based on the fact that you're mad that he hired a crisis PR firm. And by the way, the most ironic thing here is Blake and Taylor are both using crisis PR right now. Okay? They're in full crisis mode. So it's okay for me, but not for thee. And that's the theme of this with Blake. So let me know what you guys think. I want to get into the PGA letter next. I know a lot of people have covered that, especially attorneys, and the big takeaway I've heard about that document in particular is that it totally eviscerates her claims about being an independent contractor, because she talks about having complete and utter control on this movie. And you can't have it both ways, right? Like, you can't be an employee who has no power and then talk about how you had power over everything. Like, that, those two things cannot be true at the same time. So anyway, let me know what you think, and if there's something specific you want me to cover next. Again, I'm really sorry if I was all over the place. And the last thing, and this has nothing to do with the case at all, but I have noticed, as some of my videos have gained a little more traction, which I'm super grateful for. I would love to be able to do this as like more of a job than, I work like 7 days a week. But I just want to tell people, like, if you feel the need, like, you're gonna comment on my appearance, like, I've been called fat, I've been told my lipstick is ugly, or, my whatever. Like, I'm a middle-aged mom of 4, happily married. Like, you can say whatever you want to say about my appearance. I really don't care. It doesn't bother me. I don't, at my age, you just don't, those things are not bothersome. So you may not want to waste your time. Like, if you still feel the need to say something about it, go ahead. At some point, I'd love to do the where I'm just putting pictures up, scrolling, that are popping up on the screen, and you're just listening to my voice instead of having to watch me. But of course, like I said, I'm not super savvy at this point. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. Like, if you're feeling the need because you're like a crappy person and you just want to hurt somebody, like, it's not going to hurt me. So, I mean, do what you want to do, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great one, and please let me know what you'd like to see covered next. Bye-bye.